If I'm going to show you the pictures, I got to have them in order. Because, see, we got big ones of these.
Yeah.
And so we don't need them. And then let me get them in order here. One of the girls from the Manson gang gave it to me, and she said it was Charlie Manson's headband.
We
Believe
should
it?
we should start
Yeah.
there. Can
Yeah.
you tell us how you met him?
Not now. All right. After I got back from Vietnam, I rented a house down in Northridge and rented a cabin up here for $25 a month. And Wyoming Pete helped me get it. Now here's a picture of me and Wyoming Pete and Jesse James.
Wyoming Pete on the left.
Yeah. And here's another picture of Wyoming Pete. He's doing a fast draw, showing me how he was a fast draw. This is a picture of Wyoming Pete. Pete's hand in my face. Wyoming Pete and Jesse James talking to Larry Moore, the people lived down the road that would come up to visit the hermit, Sid McGehee, who lived at the top of the hill. Every Thursday, Sid would take Virginia, Pete's wife, to the store once a week and they'd get supplies. Here's another picture of him. Here's Jesse.
He's got that sheriff badge on.
Yeah, here's
just
Jesse James. And he was a sharpshooter and a trick roper and a trick and with the whips. He would crack that whip. He would have a lady light a cigarette and he'd take the ash off the cigarette and then he'd take the light out of the cigarette and then he'd take the cigarette out of her mouth with his whip.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he'd throw quarters up in the air and he'd shoot them out of the air. And this is Wyoming Pete gobbling up my ex-wife, Marianne. And this is a picture of Jesse. He always had 3 guns on him. He had a rifle and a sidearm and a little four-barrel Derringer. And here he's showing his Derringer off. Here's Pete and Jesse in front of Pete's barn.
You said the Derringer was really rare, Alfie?
Yeah, it's a rare Derringer. You don't see those 4-barrel Derringers around too much. Scary.
You said...
Here's Wyoming Pete. He could tell some tales, I'll tell you.
There he is.
Okay, here's a picture of me and Wyoming Pete and Virginia, his wife, and she was going to bean him with a frying pan. My friend Vic Shiro took these 3 pictures.
And that's
here.
you, presumably, over here on the side of this one?
Yeah. That's Virginia and Pete acting up and me leaning against their cabin. And that's Jesse James.
He's got the 4-barrel pointed right at you.
You can see what Wyoming Pete did. He had his beard and everything for these photo shoots. And he had his beaded vest and beaded gloves on with his 44. He had 2 44 Peacemakers. Then he shaved his beard like Buffalo Bill. Here's his Buffalo Bill look. That's back when he was younger. And he was a movie cowboy at times, but he traveled the Wild West with the Wild West shows all over the world. He was world traveler, and his real name was Jesse L.P. Cox, worldwidely known as Wyoming Pete. Here's another one. And here's another one. And then after he went to the rest home, I lived in the house and I got his headband. And I wore that headband until the fire in '78 on my hats. Wyoming Pete was something, man. When I got up here, a friend of mine introduced me to him, said he needed firewood, and so I brought him firewood, and they liked me right off. And he started telling stories you would not believe. As a 14-year-old kid, he got in a gunfight with one of the guys from Butch Cassidy's gang, and he killed him. And then he got, more famous. He joined the Wild West shows and was putting on different acts and traveling the world. he'd say, yeah, and I took them cattle rustlers and I tied them to a horse with barbed wire, and I whipped the horse with a rattlesnake, and he says, then I took him and I broke him in half and threw him over the hill. That don't matter to me, he. He go. That's what he would say, you know.
Oh my god.
And he said, and a rattlesnake bit me in the heart, and the snake died. And we found his divorce papers after he died, and he said that he was going to cut her tongue out with a straight razor if she ever left him. And and that was in her divorce papers, you know, so that she could, so the judge would say, oh, you better let him have a divorce. Or anyway, but Pete was a good guy, and he helped me up here, and I helped him. And this is the American Pickers.
Yeah.
This is Frank and Mike.
And they came to your property?
Yeah. And so my daughter wrote him a letter when they first got started and said, my dad's a collector. If you come to California, look him up. So they called, and then they came by. And it was a really hot day, and I'd been working somewhere else, getting ready for a big party in Topanga Canyon at my friend's house. Skipper Farley's her name. And anyway, she used to put on the Pumpkin Festival, which was a giant festival. So Frank and Mike came to the house, and it was really hot, and I was worn out. And so anyway, they came in the house. It was a mess, and it's on the they call it the California Dreaming episode.
I've looked it up a couple times. I think
and,
it's season 3, episode 11.
Yeah. And so, anyway, they bought a bunch of stuff, and they were nice and fun. But I had stuff all over the ranch here, and they just stayed around my house because it was so hot, and it was late in the day, and they, didn't have much time. So, and they bought, some stuff. They steam engine and a bomb. I had a practice bomb from the Air Force or something, and a guitar, and just a bunch of different stuff, Oh, and they had even in the episode they got my dog is there, Indy, who is a great dog. I asked him if they wanted to go to a party, and Mike said, "Well, is there going to be any pretty women there?" And I said, "Oh yeah, man, we're going to Topanga Canyon, And he says, "Okay." And so anyway, I took them down the hill, and they're from Iowa where it's flat ground and everything. And these are all twisty mountain roads and everything, all the way over on Topanga, on Mulholland Highway, all the way to Topanga. And so I took them down to the rock store, and I introduced them to Ed and Vern. And then all the bikers knew who they were, and they were all wanted to talk to them forever, and I had to pry them away to get to the party. And then we went past the old place, and they honked the horn, and I wanted to take them there later, but we had to get to the party. And we got to the party, and there was this girl I know, and she just pulled up in a brand new Maserati, and introduced them to her, and we went up the driveway, and some guy was coming out with a little Isetta, where that little BMW where the front door opens and the steering wheel's on the door, and Mike was freaking out, going, "Oh, I can't believe this car." And anyway, we got to the party, and the party was full of these collectors, and everybody, the lady that's having the party, her name is Baronessa de la Luna. That's her stage name. And she had a 1936 Nash that looked like a Rolls Royce with little flower buds on each door. And it was catered with an open bar. And everybody wanted to talk to Frank and Mike, and they enjoyed themselves and had a good time. And then they came back and they filmed a commercial up here on my property. And then they wanted to come back and look at some more of my stuff. And I told them I know a guy that's got 200 old cars from the 1920s. And so they went over to my friend Bucky's house and they bought a 1933 Ford Roadster from him that had a cherry motor in it and everything. I guess that's it on the American Picker story.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, around 1968, I had a little cabin up here on the hill, and I had a big fraternity house down in Northridge. A friend of ours owned the house, and he gave us a great deal. His sons were friends of mine. He was like the richest guy around, and he let us have the house for $100 a month. And because we were all part of the crew that grew up with his sons. His name was Muddy Hendrickson, and he was just a great person, and his wife Gladys May, wonderful people. And so, anyway, my friend Dave had a girlfriend, Sue Bartell was her name, and anyway, they broke up. And so Sue, she had it fallen out with her parents. Well, back in '68 or something like that, you know, the kids were at odds with their parents, and because the young people were doing different stuff and everything, and so she left home and said she joined this little hippie family that was living up at Spawn's Ranch. She came around, you know, and she introduced me to this girl that I can't mention her name anyway, that they said they were telling me all these stories about this family that was living up there at the Spawn's Ranch. And so they said they all just went to the desert, but they left these girls behind to kind of watch the ranch and take care of the horses. And they asked me to come up and help with the horses. So I went up there and I was helping muck out the stalls and feed the horses and stuff. And this guy that Charlie left in charge, he said, I was in their house and everything, and he put on a record player and he's playing the Beatles, and he starts telling me, interpreting these things about what the Beatles were saying. And I says, that's bullshit. That ain't gonna happen. I said, the blacks are not gonna take over the country, and there's not gonna be an uprising. I was going to school at Trade Tech College, and I had a lot of black friends, and Mexican friends, and Chinese, and Japanese friends, and I knew that people were just, you know, there was nothing like that going on, you know, and so this guy, I told him he was full of it. And he got up and he wanted to fight me. Well, I got up and I was ready to fight him right in Charlie Manson's house. It was wall-to-wall mattresses. And the girl said that Charlie would tell all these girls, okay, you're going to make love with that guy tonight, and right in front of everybody. And you're gonna, and he would match up these couples, and they'd all watch him having sex and everything in there. And she, anyway, she told me. And then they used to steal Volkswagens, and then they used to chop them down and put the engines in these dune buggies, and they were using these dune buggies up in the desert when they went up to in the mountains of Independence. And anyway, and she told me how the police raided the place. And so I was up here in the hills. I had a little cabin up here, and one night I came home, and there was like 10 girls in my driveway. And they said that I just knew 2 of them that joined the family after these murders happened. They said they'd been in jail all week up in Independence, and they needed a place to take a shower and spend the night. And I had this big house, and so I said, oh, okay, you know. They got in the house, and this one girl, Squeaky Fromm, she had all their what they call switches, and it was like they all had long hair, and then they cut their hair and they put them in braids and cut their hair, and they would fly their hairs from the antennas of these dune buggies. And so she had all these different colors of hair, and we had a big kitchen, and so she laid him across the kitchen counter. It looked like a rainbow of colors of all these different hair braids and stuff. And then one good-looking blonde girl goes, do you got any Beatles records? And I said, oh yeah, and I had a nice stereo, and so she put on this record, and she turned it up all the way, and she looked to all the girls and she said, let's get naked and dance. Well, I'm going, whoa, wow, this is something else. And all of a sudden they start stripping their clothes off and going into the shower and coming out all wet and everything. And right away I had a big old, I had the big bedroom with the big beams on the ceiling. And I had a bed with really thick ropes on it that was swinging from the center of the room. And so suddenly some of these girls getting on this bed, and they're swinging almost to the rafters, back and forth on this bed and everything. And then I can't even tell you what else about. There was some of my buddies who got in bed with them, and it was just crazy and on and on. And another buddy went in the backyard with Squeaky, and they came back with all stickers in their hair and everything. Oh man! Anyway, it was kind of it was a party place, and there was a bunch of nightclubs across the street, and so all my friends would come there that night, and ready to party, and they'd come in, and I better not mention their names because I don't want to be liable or anything like that. Yeah. But these girls would, all of a sudden, they'd strip my buddies down and take them in the shower and everything, and take them into bedrooms and everything. It's a sad story, but they know who they are. A couple of my friends got the clap from these girls. I didn't. And so anyway, the next day, it was the very next day, we're looking at I went to school, and my buddies went to work, and they're telling their friends about this crazy night they had. I would get home, and we're looking at the newscast, and there's this newscaster named George Putnam saying, we finally know who killed Sharon Tate. It was the Manson gang. And we're going, oh my God! We're going, don't anybody tell anybody what happened and all this, and we put big old boards and we boarded up the windows, and we put big old braces against the doors, and we, kind of geared up, and we couldn't believe this happened. Well, apparently one of the girls, when they were in jail, was bragging about killing somebody. And one of the people, after they let them all out of jail and they came to my house, they were looking for him because one of the girls in jail told them, these are the ones that, anyway. And so, I can't tell you anymore.